Hello. Looking at another Blur album, their fourth album from 1995, The Great Escape. I've owned this at least once before. I have memories of having it a couple of times actually, but pretty sure I had it on cassette. But I've also owned it on CD. I definitely have a memory because I remember the liner, the booklet, what do you even call it, the liner notes. I remember having that on cassette. I'm looking at specifically on cassette. But anyway, I got this one secondhand in the last 18 months, I'd guess, and for $1, and condition is fine. There's no visible cracking or anything like that. It does have this, which I showed last week when I did or early this week, whenever it was, the video of Midnight Vultures by Beck. It had the same thing. It's almost like someone's got a lighter, a cigarette lighter, and like run it over there and burnt it a little bit. It's a little bit grimy. The end. And this is the CD. See, it's kind of what I take to be like a rubber ring, a life ring, that the lifeguard would throw to you if you fell in the sea, to go along with the cover art of a guy diving into the sea off a boat. The Great Escape, I assume, means like a holiday. I'm just talking about the condition again, so like I said, it's a bit grimy there. It needs a bit of a wipe, I think. The disc is fine. Disc looks perfect, actually. Well, it's a few little scratches, actually, but nothing major. And the back is also fine. So for $1, that's a pretty good condition, and it's a pretty good album. Good to great. I've done a video previously on my favorite Blur album, the self-titled album from 1997. And I said how that's my favorite album by far, which it is. But in saying that, having listened to this for the last, I don't know, I've kind of listened to it off and on over the last week, again, after not listening to it for maybe a while. This is actually a pretty good album as well. This has got a lot of good songs. And in my mind, I think it was always tarnished by Country House. I think my negative feelings about that song kind of clouded the whole album in my mind, even though I've listened to it a million times and know all the songs pretty well. I always just kind of, my mind is just saying, oh, Great Escape, that's the Country House album. Skip. But that's not entirely fair. I don't think there's a lot of other good songs on this album. Blur touch on, I don't know, it's hard to talk about this because I don't fully understand it, but as a non-British person, I always feel Blur were, if you look at their albums before this, so Leisure being their first album, I can maybe leave that by itself, but then you got Modern Life is Rubbish, and from what I've heard Damon or other members of the band talk about, and probably more like Damon, that album was kind of like a reaction against America, as they toured America, I think, and they'd had a particularly bad experience, and they had, when you first kind of leave your home country, you miss. It kind of how it makes you appreciate it in some ways, and you miss things that you might never have imagined missing before. I feel that they were. It's hard to kind of to put this succinctly. Okay, so I found a quote here. Maybe this puts it better than I could. So they had a 44-date tour of the United States that left Blur in complete disarray. They were dismayed by American audience infatuation with grunge and the lackluster response to their music. Homesick, the tour instilled in the band a contempt for everything American. frontman Damon Albarn started to miss really simple things about England and listened to a tape of the English pop group The Kinks throughout the tour. He stated that the only pleasant memory he had of the tour was time spent listening to The Kinks' Waterloo Sunset. And so I've heard other interviews where he's talked about that as well, and how that Modern Life is Rubbish was meant to be a very British album and kind of pushing that in some way. Then there was Park Life, which, if you look at the cover of that, it's greyhound racing. And greyhound racing, I guess, is or was, and this is the same in New Zealand, because in New Zealand, very closely followed British culture and things for a long time. Nowadays, not so much. You know, over the generations, things have kind of changed as the demographic makeup of New Zealand has changed, and the relationship with Britain has become less, I guess, less strong. Like, for a long time, Britain guaranteed the sale of all New Zealand agricultural products. So that means we had a market for New Zealand wool and lamb and beef and butter and milk. Basically, it would go straight to Britain. It was like a guaranteed market. And then when Britain joined the what would become the EU in the, was it 1967 or 68, the European Common Market, that kind of cut the legs out of our market, and we had to search for other trading partners in Asia Pacific and places like that. And so since that time, the cultural connection with Britain has slowly diminished. At the same time, a lot of the things, the basis of New Zealand culture, and when I say New Zealand culture, I mean, you know, white European, what we call Pakeha culture, was based on British culture. So anyway, my point was that the greyhound racing is kind of seen as the domain of the working class, and kind of like horse racing as well. We used to say that the horse racing, rugby, and religion were the 3 R's of New Zealand culture: horse racing, rugby, and going to church. And so the use of that image on Park Life, I think, was trying to was like evocative of the British traditional working class ideas, and maybe I'm reaching here. But anyway, with this one, Great Escape, it's kind of by the 90s, the working class were able to, were able to afford European holidays to places like Greece or Spain, Portugal, Italy. And yeah, was that what, like Boys and Girls, that song, and the video for that, if you've ever seen that. I'm kind of putting a whole bunch of disparate things together and trying to make a point, which I don't really have. If you're British, maybe you could explain that a lot better than I can, and maybe you understand what I'm trying to get at. And every country has their own cultural quirks and movements that maybe are very hard to describe or explain to people who aren't from that country. And it's the same, and I see things about America, and I'm like, yeah. Anyway, okay, we're kind of rambling a lot here. That's not really important. So the actual album itself. So Damon Albarn, in retrospect, has said he doesn't really like this album, and he feels it's a mess. And I can understand what he means to a point. I think the first half of it, from stereotypes through to the universal, there seems to follow a thread, and it seems like, I don't know, it all ties together well. But from Mrs. Robinson's Quango onwards, it does sound a bit messy, and I've heard it was meant to be a concept album. I struggle to find the concept, and I've never really read anything that explains the concept other than that Damon wrote all the lyrics and he was in a certain mood, and so the songs follow that mood or feeling. But I think a concept album needs a bit more to it than just that, surely. But Stereotypes, that's a great song. That's just a great straight ahead kind of classic Blur rock song. Country House, I've said my feelings about before. I don't like that song. I think it sounds like a joke song or a novelty song. Best Days kind of starts off with a picked acoustic, a bass, and then it comes in with this kind of very big chorus. And something that Blur always does really well is that the backing harmonies, the oohs, and the backgrounds, always done very, very well. Adds a lot to the kind of the depth and the lushness of the sound of the song. Charmless Man, I remember that was a single. That's a good song as well. Fade Away and Top Man. I've always kind of put those two songs together because they both start off with a kind of drum machine sound. Yeah, they do. So Fade Away starts with the drum machine. It kind of comes in with this organ. And I was talking before about the whole British thing. You know, I don't know if I should start talking about it because I just don't know what I'm talking about. But if you spend even a little bit of time in Britain, in England, I shouldn't say England because I think Scotland and Wales maybe a little bit, or certainly Scotland. But you know, they're like, actually no, I'm not going to talk about it because I'm just going to spout a bunch of shit. I don't know what I'm talking about. I think Fade Away is a good song. But it's almost, again, a little bit like tongue-in-cheek, novelty-ish sounding, but in a good way. I enjoy that song. I especially like the chorus. His voice is kind of does this falsetto in the chorus. And it's got horns as well. Got a horn section. A few of these songs have got horns. Then Top Man also starts with the drum machine, and it's got this kind of vocal, I don't know, repeating vocal line or sample of the oh. But again, maybe that's why I connected Fade Away and Top Man in my mind, is they both had this kind of cheesy novelty song-ish feel to them, but in a good way. Whereas Country House, I feel, is a bad way, and I don't like that song. I feel those two songs do it well. The Universal, I've never really liked that song. Very art pop, art rock. It's not a bad song, but maybe I heard it too much in my youth and kind of got sick of it. Then you went to Mrs. Robinson's Quango, and yeah, I feel that the album, yeah, like I said, becomes kind of a bit unfocused from song 8 onwards. He Thought of Cars. I think that's actually got one of the songs on this album that kind of connects to the next album. If the rest of the songs you can kind of connect backwards to Park Life and Modern Life is Rubbish and that kind of classic Blur sound, and in the evolution of that, I think He Thought of Cars, at least in the verse, maybe not the chorus so much, but the verse kind of connects to the sound they would eventually come to on the self-titled album in 2 years later. Ernald Same is a bit of a throwaway song. It's got a vocal, apparently it's not a sample, but it's Ken Livingstone, former Mayor of London, is the person speaking in that. It's kind of just like a short nothing song, I've always felt. Then we've got Globe Alone. It's got a good punk chorus, very catchy. Dan Abnormal. I don't like that song. Dan Abnormal apparently it's a, what do you call it? What's the word when you take all the letters from one word and you can mix them up and make another, not an acronym. Hang on, that's going to annoy me. Anagram is the word I was searching for. Dan Abnormal is an anagram for Damon Albarn. And he felt that maybe he was abnormal. That song has that, especially the part I don't like is the chorus and Damon Albarn's layered vocals. His vocals can become too much sometimes in certain delivery ways that I don't like. And that song's almost, again, it's like jokey. So the thing is that with Blur, and maybe one of the reasons why some people don't like is that they tread the line of joke band, or not joke band, but joke song, novelty song, too finely and cross the line too often, in my opinion. And it kind of takes away from the other music. Entertain Me, the next song, that's a great song. That's a great straight ahead song, Entertain Me. That's one of my favorite songs on the album, actually, track 14. And then Yuko and Hiro is, that's an okay song. It's about when they went to Japan. Um, Damon Albarn was kind of shocked or enthralled or whatever you want to call it with the Japanese work ethic and Japanese people's what do you call it, dedication to their company or their jobs. Which, if you've ever been to Japan, to be honest, it might have changed in recent years. You know, he probably wrote that in the mid-90s, and Japanese culture, like all cultures, has changed in the meantime. And I lived in Japan about 15 years ago, and it's, I think with the younger generation, things have changed, and also with the economy. You know, the Japanese economy has kind of been in a stagnation for almost 30 years now. It's very slow growth. Anyway, his it was meant to be about the Japanese workers, and it's kind of just a bit of a psychedelic, woozy type rock pop song. So overall, yeah, there's some really good songs on it. Some really, really great songs. Stereotypes, Fade Away, He Thought of Cars, Globe Alone, Entertain Me, and some other good songs like Best Days, Charmless Man, Top Man, The Universal, Mrs. Robinson's Kwango's okay. But sorry, I'm still recovering from COVID. Or at least I've got the cough still. And I'm saying, but not saying, but all these other songs are terrible. It ruins the album. But I'll just say that it's not all great. There are some songs I don't like as much. But overall, it's a pretty good album. And what I was thinking listening to it, it's like I really don't think you can even compare Oasis and Blur. They're really, really quite different type bands. Oasis is so much more straight ahead music, straightforward. Not saying one's better or worse, or I like both bands. I liked Oasis a lot when I was younger. I own all their albums now. I went to their show when they toured here in 1998. I've seen Liam Gallagher solo in 2017. I'd say I like Blur a little bit more, but Blur's music has just got so much more to it. And the good and the bad, that whatever you take that to be good or bad. Some people don't like that aspect of them, but all that kind of Blur versus Oasis thing, in retrospect, really was a ridiculous, because they're not even comparable in my opinion. Okay, I was just going through this. Looking at the artwork. So we got this kind of English housing estate development type thing here. A picture you'd see in a travel agency booking your holidays. Some guy on the beach. Oh, that's morbid. Is that a connection to the next album? Never thought about that before. They're trying to show something there with those images. The holidays, the guys at work, the house on the new development, the new housing development, the overseas holidays, the beach body, death. Is that what they're trying to say? I don't know. I always feel like they're trying to say something, but I don't understand what they're trying to say because I don't get all the cultural references. I'm not British. I'm not English. And maybe that's why they never really broke into America in any way other than maybe with a few, like Song 2, I think they did okay. But yeah, I'm not sure. And like I think I said in the other video, a lot of people had this kind of real disdain for Blur and Damon Albarn in particular, and a lot of that was to do with they liked Oasis, and the Gallagher brothers seemed to particularly hate Damon, and they wished AIDS on him, and I think him and Alex James, the bassist, they didn't mind Graham Coxon, who, by the way, Graham Coxon is a amazing guitarist, brilliant guitarist. Listening to his things, that's what really stands out is his guitar work. And when he left the band, those albums they made when he left, there's some okay stuff on there, but much better with him in the band. What I was saying is that people didn't like them. It's because maybe that these kinds of cultural commentary that they were making, and I remember it was in that documentary. Hang on. Live Forever, The Rise and Fall of Britpop. It's actually, I can just see now, it's all on YouTube. An hour and 20 minutes. It's available on YouTube. That's good. So I've seen that. And they interviewed Damon and Noel and like all the big players. Okay, so I found that here's Noel talking about Damon's, some of the cultural commentary he had on Park Life. But again, kind of just the general overall kind of feeling he had towards him.
Into politics then. He was dissatisfied with the shopping mall culture that was creeping in over here. Well, that just goes to show what a pompous arse he is. If you've got the time to sit down and worry about American culture creeping into British society, then I would get a proper fucking job. Other people are too busy trying to make a living.
And he talks here a little bit about his feeling about Blur's music.
See, the thing about Blur is that I respect them totally as musicians. The guitarist, Graham Coxon, is by far and away probably one of the most talented guitarists of his generation. And Damon's written some good songs, but he'll always come out with a condescending comment like that, what does he know about British culture? He knows nothing. He's from Colchester. He's a fucking student. He took A-level music. He knows nothing. Nothing.
Which I think that captures perfectly about the feeling what I was saying. Some people felt about that. Blur were kind of middle class boys making these comments on British culture, whereas who are they to do so? They're a bunch of students, whereas Oasis are a true working class and yada yada yada. But I feel that kind of view and attitude towards Blur was quite pervasive and kind of maybe hurt them in some way. But anyway, I'm running out of time, so we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching.